Coming up on At the Heart of It with Nancy Brown.
That trait of building relationships and genuinely caring about another human being comes directly from my family upbringing. Understanding is beyond listening. You really have to sit there and listen to folks and make them feel like they're part of the conversation.
Bravery, dedication, vision, and leadership. These words and more describe my next guest, who has a deep desire to make a lasting impact on the world. His drive is fueled by passion and ambition, even when the going gets tough. The story of Oscar Munoz is filled with a lot of firsts. He was the first in his family to go to college and later to become the first Hispanic CEO to lead a major U.S. airline. He was also the first in his family to be diagnosed with heart disease and later became one of the first CEOs to return to work after having a heart transplant. Oscar's story is full of humility, optimism, and a lot of heart. Welcome to At the Heart of It. I'm Nancy Brown, CEO of the American Heart Association.
The child of Mexican immigrants, Oscar Munoz grew up in Southern California and eventually earned his way into the leadership ranks at some of the world's most recognizable brands. Known for his authenticity, communication, and values-based decision-making, the insightful leader was named CEO of United Airlines in 2015. Optimistic about the future, Oscar embarked on a listening tour to learn about the concerns of employees and customers alike. But just over a month into his new job, he suffered a heart attack. Oscar was shocked by the official diagnosis: atherosclerosis, a chronic disease that leads to narrowing and hardening of the arteries. As a vegan and athlete, he never suspected that his heart health was in jeopardy. But the symptoms of atherosclerosis often go undetected until advanced stages. Because his heart was so severely damaged, Oscar needed a transplant. Throughout his rehabilitation and recovery, Oscar continued to lead United Airlines, shepherding it into a new era of trust and customer satisfaction. He's retired now and busier than ever, putting his resources into forward-thinking technologies that will have a huge impact on society.
Oscar, you're a living legacy, and I'm so excited to have the opportunity to learn more about who you are. So let's start with what I call my signature 5. Are you ready?
I've heard about these.
I know. Let's see. It's not that hard, I promise. Staycation or vacation?
Of course, vacation. And by the way, United flies you to any one of those places that you might want to go.
Exactly. What was your least favorite chore when you were growing up?
My dad was this chronic car nut, and he'd come home from work and he says, my spark plugs need gapping or something. So he'd have me work on the car.
What is your favorite place to catch a wave?
I got to go with my boyhood place on the OC in Cali, a place called the River Jetties between Newport Beach and Huntington Beach.
What a gorgeous area. Oh my gosh. What is the best career advice you have ever received?
You know, when I thought I was really doing well at a very young age, and I had moved from one company to another, and I was doing great. I had a review with my boss, and he was saying all the great things. Oh, Oscar, I took a chance on you. Everything's going great. And then he closed the sort of HR book and pushed it aside, and he kind of leans over and says, as a friend, if I could give you any advice, I'm like, he's going to,
yes.
He wants me to date his daughter or something. And he said, you're not yet as good as you think you are. And I remember thinking, it's like, wait, that didn't sound positive. And what it meant is kind of in today's term, slow your roll a little bit. There's a lot of people around you that are willing to help if you just learn to appreciate their input and value.
If you could learn another language, what would it be?
I would refine, and you'll be surprised at this, my Spanish. I could not do this with my level of comfort in Spanish, and I want to get to that point again.
Is that right?
Yeah, no, you lose it over time, right?
Well, thank you for giving us that insight into who you are. So let's get into the heart and soul of what we want to talk about today. Fewer than 4% of CEOs running Fortune 500 companies are Hispanic. And I know you'd like to see more leadership diversity. Why is it important to make people like yourself the expectation, not the exception?
I have an approach to diversity and inclusion that is centered on practicality and business issues as opposed to just inclusion for numbers' sake. The world is changing around us, and specifically with Hispanics, not only a large and growing population, it's also a dynamic, more affluent, more educated, digitally native, incredibly fiercely loyal to their brand. So my approach to this is like, hire whoever you want, whenever, you should do all of that, but understand that your future marketplace and consumers are Hispanic. Wouldn't you want to have a vice at a board level or something, or even at the CEO who can actually appreciate and help you grow your business?
Well, during your years as CEO of United, you were so sought after by many companies and by many individuals for your advice on how to have that presence as a CEO or in a boardroom. What kind of advice do you give?
There's lots of viewpoints on this. My personal viewpoint, it's because of the age I grew up in, where you didn't talk about these things. And over time, our nation has become more open to these debates and conversations, but there's still a lot of bias, period. And it's always going to be in that regard. And there's a famous person that I've met inside of United Airlines who was the first African-American pilot. His name is Bill Norwood. And he has this magical phrase that I use all the time. He said, growing up in Lower Alabama at the age that I was growing up, you learned as a child that because of your color, you had to work twice as hard to get half as far. You roll forward to today, I think you still have to work probably harder than others. And that's where people get a little, why should we have to? I'm telling you, you probably have to. But I think we're making progression on the half as far. And where I like to talk about myself in that way, not other things that I've accomplished, but look, I've gone through this process. I'm a regular human. I grew up from very humble beginnings, and I've been able to progress through this. And my secret has always been, I work with you, I listen to you, I understand what you want, and I work with you, and I make everyone around me feel like they're part of the equation. That has led to a lot of success. And I think people need to hear that normal human dynamics and capabilities aren't embedded in your race, color, sex, or creed, but you can indeed do a lot. And for people that are underrepresented, you sometimes have to work a little harder and also smarter in that regard. So it's not about forcing people to do things because you need more numbers. It's about really appreciating the people around you and understanding who they are and what they bring from the perspective is such a different thing.
One thing I've observed about you over the time that I've known you is you are a relationship builder. Like I watch you in a room. You're not working a room. You're genuinely building relationships. And it sort of speaks to what you were just saying. Give us a little bit of that philosophy. Why does that anchor you as a human being?
That trait of building relationships and genuinely caring about another human being comes directly from my family upbringing. It's how I grew up. It's how I speak a lot about my maternal grandmother, who at the height of her career was a maid at the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas. Now, mind you, in her last years, she was voted to the Hall of Fame of employees at the Flamingo Hotel, and her plaque still sits at that hotel in Las Vegas. That's the foundation of who I am. And people, I talk about a concept called listen, learn, and only then can you lead, which means before you tackle an issue and a problem, understand what the real issue is from the people that actually face the issues. In my United world, it was the frontline employees that service you as a customer. I went to ask them, what is it that's broken? Important people that you and I meet all the time, of course, are fascinating. But you know what? The person that throws your bag at the airport or fixes your aircraft have pretty important humans in their life too. And so simple questions like, tell me about your family, tell me about your kids, or why it's hard, because it takes time. Once you understand them as a human and what drives them to think the way they do, then you have an effective process of being able to help them see the other side. Understanding is beyond listening. You really have to sit there and listen to folks and make them feel like they're part of the conversation.
You have been on the other side of listening when you had your heart issues. Tell us a little bit about that moment in your life. What happened and what was going through your head? Because suddenly you were listening to doctors and nurses. Go back in time and tell us about that journey.
I was an avid biker, marathon runner, and I was a vegan on top of this. So, but nevertheless, as you well know, heart disease is an invisible thing you don't know. I fortunately had a good friend who was a cardiovascular surgeon who would always kind of tell us as friends that some of the youngest and relatively fit people that die on my operating table die because they don't understand the symptoms, they don't understand what to do. And then he led on later with the concept of, if you ever feel anything, and he used the term weird, just call 911 immediately. But then he added something that, in effect, without being dramatic, kind of saved my life. Because he said, and when you reach 911, he said, immediately tell them where you are, which that sounds like duh, right? But he added, because you may not make it past the phone call. Fast forward 2 years, I just went for a run. I'm in my high-rise apartment, temporary rental apartment. I've just started work at United. I'm 37 days into the job. Got a ton of stuff going on. And my phone buzzes across the room. And as I go to get it, my legs sort of give out. And I hadn't run that hard. And as I took another step, my legs actually gave out. And I was on my knees. I felt clammy. And his words in that conversation came rushing back to me. And I crawled to my landline, and I immediately called out and told them where they were. And then I crawled to my front door, which was locked, thinking, how are they going to get in? So I had enough ability to do that. And so that's what happened. I was put on ECMO, heart-lung machine, and on a medically induced coma. So 7 days I spent doing that. And then when I woke up, the recovery process began. And then the diagnosis process that my heart had, as my doctor said, your heart has received major insults. So I'd blown up my heart. And then eventually the conversation about a transplant began. And I'll tell you, and you know this, you see many people and say, as a human being, when somebody tells you your heart's broken and you need a new one, and you're like, yeah, no, we're gonna skip that part.
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
I'll fix this somehow. And of course, went around and got some second opinions, and it was clear that way. Fast forward a little bit of time, this is back to the concept of listening and connecting. I always use another term called proof, not promise. Why? The proof of how important listening is, because in 37 days, I connected at a level with the company of 100,000 employees that they hadn't seen before. So for a period of time there, 3 or 4 weeks while I was in the hospital, the amount of mail, flowers, food that came pouring into that little apartment from all over the world of the United family was amazing. And here's the more, I think, measurable, poignant part for me. These bags of mail would come with my children every morning. And they would sit there and read these letters from people I had never met with, get well and get back. There's a lot of get back soon kind of things. But for me, it reinforced not only that I had connected with them, but B, how what a wonderful family to do outreach to someone that didn't really know. And interestingly, in my family dynamics, when it came time to sort of make the decision of what do you do next after this sort of event, do you go back to work or not? Do you have to go back to work? And it was never a question. We never raised it as a family. I think that experience, and it's what bonded me with the United family. And again, I offer as proof, not promise, of how important that level of engagement and genuine connection can really be.
It's so true. And I think it probably helped you through the really rocky times that the airline industry went through. And you talk about that a lot in your book, Turnaround Time. Your leadership approach was always based on a duty to care for employees, for your customers, communities. We've talked about that. Tell us more about being a servant leader, and tell us more about Turnaround Time.
It's a very much of a very long love letter, I think, to United employees. They helped me, as I just described, to this hard aspect. We had many crises during my time, which I talk about. CEO memoirs generally tend to be, hey, look at me, look what we've done, success, great. I would characterize my book as, interestingly, probably more failures and issues that we had to resolve and how we did that, as opposed to we were so smart and we did wonderful, smart things and created a really good business model that lives to this day. And with regards to the how we handled a lot of the issues at the airline, it really became a function of the support from the employees.
I've learned so much by reading your book, because I think learning from other people's challenges is really the best way to learn versus here's all the amazing things I've done.
I use phrases like, especially when I talk about this, and I'll look at people in the audience and say, all of you at some point in time will face a moment of crisis where you will not have any more analysis, you will not have any more direction. You're going to have to do and say something that is going to be profound for how the future works. And there will be no one else but yourself and everyone that you've met along the way.
I think about you, the physical heart, your emotional heart, and your passionate heart. So let's talk about your passion for investing, which is what you're focused on right now. Tell us about your investing, your venture fund. What are you doing? Whose lives are you focused on making better?
We fund Latino and Latina founders in early stage funding because they don't have access to money. They have great ideas. They're just as smart as anybody else, but they don't know their way around the process. So myself and my partners have been around long enough, know enough people, so we can connect them to the right folks and at the same time, potentially build a really good product, educate people that aren't usually known in this space. And I think that's the way you move forward in this diversity space.
You have generously supported our social impact fund. Talk to us about why that matters to you and what you hope we will accomplish.
First, kudos to you and your team. The conversation about me, because obviously of the heart situation and the connection that we have just fundamentally by what I've gone through and understanding what you all do, what vehicles are open to me as opposed to just writing a check that you take and do really wonderful things. This topic came up. It's like, this is a great idea, a social impact fund where we take money and very much like a venture capital, you find, small budding philanthropies and social causes that are within the community who truly understand what the need is. And it's people it's like people. It's not somebody from outside coming in. And I just thought that was a fascinating way to provide support for this. And I love it. And the way it's going, it's such a rigorous process. We're teaching all of these folks the importance of, how do you communicate your cause? Everyone's passionate. Everybody will talk to you about the things they want to do, but the world lives in a more economic, practical way. So, okay, what is it? Who's it going to reach? How much is it going to cost? And you have to be able to answer those questions. And I think the people on your team will be able to do that. And so I'm really excited about that. And that's what drove our decision to help with this.
And your gift has inspired so many others. And we're so proud of the Social Impact Fund at the HA because real people's lives are being changed. And when you think about these innovators in local communities who are dedicating their entire life to fixing issues of healthcare access or food security or, economic advantage, it really does, bring you hope for the future.
In addition, these are smart, driven, capable people, but the fact that they break away from that and go back to their communities, that's worth a lot to me. So that alone drives that motivation because they're beyond passion. They have a real dedication to the causes. And I think it's just a great example for people to follow.
Would you call that living the American dream? I wonder what living the American dream means to you.
The American dream is a combination of many things. You do have to work hard. You do have to be focused. You do have to do certain things, but it also requires a lot of help and assistance. And so the American dream is alive and well. I'm a perfect example of that, as you are, so many people that we know, and providing that to the broader, growing, more diversely growing population in America is something that I think we should all be meaningfully involved in.
So you have had such a remarkable life, and you're still a young man. So what's on the horizon? Tell us what projects you're working on. What are you excited about?
Oh gosh, so many things. I often answer the question, I always answer the question, it's like, listen, I'm staying really busy, I'm healthy, and I'm happy. And I think that's a combination that we should all strive for. So in the busy part, it involves a ton of things, corporate boards, advisories, philanthropies, investing, the VC, writing the book was a exhausting, I was going to say fun experience, but I'd rather wear out than rust out. I can never see a point in my life where I would just be sitting and not doing anything.
Well, thank you for sharing your dream with us, and thank you for sharing your background. We are so honored at the AHA to call you a friend, a cherished part of our organization. And I know our viewers today have learned so much from listening to you. Oscar, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. It's great fun.
Thank you. Oscar Munoz is one of the most optimistic and insightful people I know, and I'm so thankful to call him a dear friend. He's making big bets on innovative technologies that have the potential to make all of our lives longer and healthier. If even a few of them succeed, we all win. How do you envision the future of health and well-being? What are you doing to make the world a better place? I would love to hear from you. So comment below, hit subscribe, and join me here next time for more inspiring conversations. From my heart to yours, thank you for watching.